afternoon. I'm Hugh Harris at the Kennedy Space Center, and I'd like to welcome you to the pre-launch press briefing for STS-7. And with us in the briefing is Lieutenant General James A. Abramson, who is the Associate Administrator for the Office of Spaceflight from NASA headquarters, Glenn Lunny, who is Director of National STS Program at Johnson Space Center, and let me reintroduce the people taking part in our STS-7 pre-launch press briefing. Lieutenant General James A. Abramson, who is the Associate Administrator for the Office of Spaceflight, NASA headquarters. Glenn Lunny, who is the Director of the National STS Program Office at Johnson Space Center. Al O'Hara, who is the Director of Launch and Landing Operations at the Kennedy Space Center. And Major Donald J. Green, who is the U.S. Air Force Range Staff Meteorologist. And we'll begin our briefing with Lieutenant General James Abramson.
First of all, high technology NASA, we're starting with a new microphone here that I can't see. So can everybody hear okay? Does that work? High technology NASA.
Let's get that second mic on. Abramson's talking. Can I use your head?
Okay. Now can you hear me all right? Okay. Well, as you all know, we've had really a smooth count this time. And we're really very, very pleased with that. And let me give you just a couple of figures so that you can get a feel for it in terms of work days and calendar days. For STS, and this time in terms of work days, some 63 work days. And there's a little, it depends on how you want to count work days. Some people get it counted slightly different. Calendar days, about 64. The best flight we had prior to this time was STS-4, and that was 77 work days and 82 calendar days. Now, to show you that we're really intending to keep moving on that learning curve, even though we have not set a firm date yet for STS-8, we're going to be shooting for on the order of 50 work days, assuming, of course, that we come down in good shape from this particular mission. In terms of half for us that have been problem areas, actually the entire count has been very smooth throughout the entire effort. And right up at the last minute, of course, there'll be some little thing that keeps us from being bored. And yesterday we did have a minor problem with the mission event controller. They're a highly redundant unit, and I think there's already been an announcement on that, a press release on that, so you know that story. But it certainly hasn't caused any problem, and we're very confident that we can go ahead with the launch. So only really serious issue or question mark in our minds at this point in time is the weather. So I'm going to ask Mr. Green to comment very briefly on the weather. Locally here, what we expect tomorrow morning, and the other question mark, which is at our abort site in Dakar in Senegal. And of course, you all know that just after just a few minutes of flight, if we choose to abort, we could abort across the ocean at Dakar, and so we watched that particular weather just like we watched the weather here at the Cape. Major Green, would you come in briefly, please?
Yes, sir. The weather tomorrow should be much repeated what we have today. Turning down into a high-pressure system has given us cloudy skies and some periods of very light rain shower activity with flow from the northeast. And what's happening, we're having some showers develop over the water, and with the flow from the water, we have periods of these showers moving across the Cape area. As we get later on into the day, mid-morning, we get shower temperatures, and we get more vertical development and more cloud cover. So after about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, we will have a greater chance of precipitation and occasional periods of ceilings around 2,500 feet. The forecast for the zero tomorrow is looking good. We're forecasting 2,000 scattered, 25,000 scattered. The visibility is 7 miles or greater, and wind 0.40 degrees at 5 knots out of the northeast. There will be some light rain showers in there.
Al O'Hara, who is the Director of Launch and Landing Operations at the Kennedy Space Center, and Major Donald J. Green, who is the U.S. Air Force Range Staff Meteorologist. And we'll begin our briefing with Lieutenant General James Abramson.
First of all, high technology NASA, we're starting with a microphone here that I can even see. So everybody here, okay, does that work? High technology NASA.
Let's get that second icon. General Abramson's talking. Nobody's hearing. Can I use your head?
Okay. Now can you hear me all right? Okay. Well, as you all know, we've had really a smooth count this time. And we're really very, very pleased with that. And let me give you just a couple of figures so that you can get a feel for it in terms of work days and calendar days. For STS-7 this time, in terms of work days, some 63 days. And there's a little, it depends on how you want to count work days, so some people get it counted slightly different. Count days about 64. The best flight that we had prior to this time was STS-4, and that was 77 work days and 82 calendar days. Now, just to show you that we're really intending to keep moving down that learning curve, even though we have not set a firm date yet for STS-8, we're going to be shooting for on the order of 50 work days, assuming, of course, that we come down in good shape from this particular mission. In terms of things that have happened for us that have been problem areas, actually the entire count has been very smooth throughout the entire effort. And right up at the last minute, of course, there's some little thing that keeps us from being bored. And yesterday we did have a minor problem with the mission event controller. This is a highly redundant unit, and I think there's already been an announcement on that, a press release on that, so you know that story. But it certainly hasn't caused any problem, and we're very confident that we can go ahead with the launch. So the only really serious issue or a question mark in minds at this point in time is the weather. So I'm going to ask Major Green to comment very briefly on the weather. Locally here, what we expect tomorrow morning, and the other question mark, which is at our abort site in Dakar in Senegal. And of course, you all know that just after a few minutes of flight, if we choose to abort, we could abort across the ocean at Dakar. And so we watch that particular weather just like we watch the weather here at the Cape. Major Green, would you comment briefly, please?
Yes, sir. The weather tomorrow should be more or less a repeat of what we had today. We're under the dominance of a high-pressure system, giving us partly cloudy skies and some periods of very light rain shower activity with flow from the northeast. And what's happening, we're having showers develop over the water, and with the flow from the water, we have periods of these showers moving across the Cape area. As we get later on into the day, mid-morning, we get high temperatures, and we get more vertical development and more cloud cover. So after about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, we will have a greater chance of precipitation and occasional periods of ceilings around 2,500, 3,000 feet. But our forecast for the T0 tomorrow is looking good. We're forecasting 2,000 scattered, 25,000 scattered, visibilities 7 miles or greater, and winds 040 degrees at 5 knots out of the northeast. There will be some light rain showers in the air, and our forecast crop tomorrow will be finding these rain showers, advising the launch director of the impact on his launch count. Edwards Air Force Base is looking good to support tomorrow. They're forecasting scattered conditions at 25,000 feet and visibilities 7 miles or greater, and winds 240 at 12. As the general said, we are a little bit concerned about the car. Looks like they have some stratus or some ceilings moving in and out of the car. This morning around 13Z, they had 1,300-foot ceilings down there, and then at 15Z, they were mostly clear again. The forecast tomorrow to support a TAL is a 1,300-foot ceiling and a visibility of 3 to 5 miles and some slant range formation dust, or dust aloft. We've been talking to the folks down in Johnson, and they'll be doing real-time flies down there to determine the cloud cover and determine the slant range visibilities. but we are concerned and we're closely watching them. In summary then, gave Mr. O'Hara a go for weather. Looks like we're going to have scattered cloud conditions. We will have some showers in the local area, and we'll be tracking them and advising them how it's going to impact the launch operations.
Okay, Glenn, and would you like to make some summary comments about the mission plan, please?
STS-7 has been what we hope will become the model, I think, for flights in the future. The flow here has been described briefly by General Abramson, probably will some more by Al O'Hara, has been very smooth. The planning for the flight has very smooth all along. That is the flight planning. The cargo configuration is stable. It's a fun cargo. There are a lot of exciting things to do on this flight. We have to do activities in the sense of having 5 crew people on board rather than 4, the max we've had in the past. And we're continuing to learn what the size of the crew has to do with the workload that they will be able to handle on board. So we're kind of looking forward to that kind of experience. Probably the high point also will be the landing back here at Kennedy next week. There's been a lot of attention paid to that, both by you folks and certainly by us in the program. We're confident we're going to be able to do that, and we'll be probably spending the last few days before landing next week doing the same worrying over the weather that we do here every time. But I guess I'm confident that that's going to turn out all right. We're going to find a day we can land here and perhaps set a new model for the rest of the flights in the future.
Al O'Hara?
A little to add, as you all know, the countdown has gone very smoothly, as General Abramson has said, and the flow, as Glenn has said, has been relatively smooth. Just stopped by the room before I came over just now, and things are no problems, no hidden problems. No one's worried about anything that I can detect. So we're optimistic about being able to pick up on time this evening and get into cryo loading of the ET about midnight. You have the timelines. I don't need to go over those unless you have some questions. So we're real happy the way the flow went. We're looking forward to STS-8 and even a tighter timeline. And we'll, as General Abramson said, if it comes back from flight with minimum problems, we'll have a good shot at that quick turnaround. So we're happy and looking forward to the good weather tomorrow. And we hope it will be prepared here. And of course, as you already heard, we'll be watching closely the activity at the car.
Thank you. We're ready for questions now, and we'll start right here in the middle with Crippen, right by you, Bobby.
I've got questions for both Abe and Glenn. Glenn, I understand that although it's not in a formal timeline, Norm Thagard is looking at donning and pressurizing his suit to get some additional data on the fan and the fit 0G. Is that in fact a planned activity now, and if so, when might you do it?
Craig, my knowledge is not planned right now, and I hadn't heard the proposal by Norm, but there is plenty of time to do that in the flow. I'm going to go see the folks after this press conference, and if he wants to do that and we can work it in, we will, and we'll let you know.
Okay. And for Abe, the German Space payload people couldn't get the required about $300 million in liability insurance needed for the flight because Palapa and Telesat swamped the market with $1 billion. NASA was working this last week to try and tie the Space with the Indonesian payload. Were you able to do that, or did you have to go to the last resort and have the government insure them?
In our contract,
He must be from Arianesbach. In our contract that we established, we have the right to do that ahead of time. So that is contractually available to us, and therefore, by the time that we get launched tomorrow, if we aren't able to do that, we'll just go ahead and exercise it. Obviously, we would like to have the approval of the Indonesian contingent. It'll save them a small amount of money, so I wouldn't suspect that they would be unhappy with doing that. But it is just an element of foresight that I think that we've built into all of our insurance contracts, and so we don't see any problem associated with it at all.
Dave Dooling, 100 times.
Abe, I'd like to jump forward just a little bit in the schedule. What impact is cancellation of STS-10 going to have on the overall flow? And what plans does NASA have now for development of standby cargoes? Specifically, what is the status of Hitchhiker, and why weren't more adequate standbys available other than the 1 million odd postal coverage that will be carrying on 8?
Okay. Dave, I think the first and the most important thing that STS-10 delay gives us is it gives us two options for the 9th mission, our very important Space Lab mission. As you know, our primary target is for the end of September, and we have a desired launch window that we're working for the maximum science benefit from the 30th of September until about the August or October 3rd. And all of our planning looks very good to maintain that. However, if for some reason we ran into a delay in getting TDRS up and fully checked out, we now have an option to slip to the next dark period, which would be the end of October, without impacting anything else on the timeline. Now, it does impact some of the other science activities, however, and so that's much less desirable. So the first and most important impact is that it gives us two options for SPLAB, and that's a very desirable and a positive thing. In terms of the long-term impact on the overall manifest, we had a release from Washington 2 days ago that tried to indicate that we're maintaining the 11 schedule. That's the commercial payload schedule, both on 11 and 12, that we think is very vital, and we want to maintain that priority for those customers. We're maintaining 13 and 14. I'm sorry, I made an error there. 12 is the next opportunity that we have to launch an IUS TDRS combination, and depending on the progress that we make in regaining confidence in the IUS upper stage, that we could plan for that particular mission quite easily. The next one after that is a refly opportunity that we're holding open. It's number 15. So in the long term, there's very little impact on the overall schedule at all. Now, you asked, what about Hitchhiker, and where are we on that? Unfortunately, that program really just got started this summer, and therefore we don't have a lot of standby payloads that are just ready and waiting to go. I would frankly like to have just a great lineup, starting from some college students with experiments right up through some industrial experiments, but they're not ready. And therefore, we can't just throw on anything very special. But we did move forward the flight test article from 11, and that gives us a little more time so that if we are able to develop a Hitchhiker payload that somebody could respond to quickly, there might be room to put it on 11. It's kind of a complex answer, but that's a view of our overall manifest.
Jay Barbary, NBC.
I have a two-part question. First, for Al O'Hara. Al, could you define for us your latest thinking on tomorrow morning's window? Are we up to 30 minutes? Are we still at 5? Exactly where we are? And my second part question is for all three of you. I understand that you've been thinking that in case of weather before Friday, you could come back here a day early. If necessary, you could waive off for up to 4 days to get a KS landing. Is that pretty much how you're thinking, or are you going to panic if you see weather coming in and go into Edwards on Friday right away?
Al, you want to take the first part?
I'll take the launch window, but I'll refer to the other gentleman for the second part of the question. Very simply stated, we do have a 5-minute launch window that opens at 7:30. Now, as you know, we have a 10-minute hold, T-9. If during that hold a problem occurs that would prevent us from hitting that desirable 5-minute window, we will then retarget for the second window, which starts at 8:24 and lasts for 30 minutes. If we have picked up at T-9, okay, and have proceeded down and have a hold, and we only have a 10 hold capability at that point in time due to the LOX drainback issue, and we cannot make that 5-minute window, we would proceed to launch even though it might be slightly beyond that window. Okay, so the key thing is, are we in the 10 hold when we have a problem or have weather? If so, we'll wait till the second window. If we have picked up at 9 and have to hold momentarily, or say 5 minutes or so, we would proceed. That's the launch mission rule, and we've all agreed on it. And I know there has been some confusion, but I hope that clears up.
Okay, do you want to take the second part?
Relative to the landing, had a number of options. As you know, we have a flight plan with 2 days contingency. We could probably squeeze some more out on orbit if we wanted to, or if we had to, depending on what the lead time we had and knowing we wanted to do that. And I've sat here a number of times and discussed with the people in Florida why we weren't landing, and here we are going to land the first one we're planning to, and there's perhaps some skepticism. And I think perhaps the best indicator that you can get that we are serious about landing in Florida is not from we in the program or we in the government, but rather most of the flight crews have brought their families down, and they're going to stay the week, and they plan to be here for the landing. So we're going to try not to disappoint them.
Yeah. Mark Kramer from CBS.
Question for Major Green. What's the cutoff on the weather criteria for Dakar? And I guess for anyone who has seen the crew today, what is the crew doing, saying, thinking today?
We have a flight launch commit guideline that's 10,000 foot ceilings. But that's only a guideline. What will happen in real time is that the people at the car will advise the launch team of what they see out there and how they feel the weather will be impacting a TAL if it needs be.
I'd like to comment on that, Mark. You know, we do have an Air Force C-9 there, and that's precisely why we fly the approaches. That's precisely why we have John Young and an experienced set of eyeballs flying the approaches here as well. And it's not that I don't weather people here, Major Green, but
Understand.
but we really do put a lot of weight in what the pilot thinks and what he can see from the position that he's at, and that's the final judgment.
Have there been launches in the past in the shuttle program in which you did not meet those criteria, but the pilot flying out there said it's okay and you went ahead?
I think at Dakar, in general, we've met the criteria and haven't had an interpretation going on. Sometimes it's marginal. One of the problems at Dakar, of course, is we get a lot of haze there because of the Sahara Desert and the natural condition of the area. But I don't think we had to bend the rule too much, if that's what you're asking, in terms of the pilot interpretation. I think we want to convince ourselves that we got a landable situation. We've debated this many times in the program as to what landable is. We've also debated the unique likelihood of ever having used the Dakar, the transatlantic site. So it's a kind of close call on absolutely requiring it, and it's a close call, or a judgment call, really, on what weather is landable. The landing situation in the cockpit, of course, is improved with Challenger with the heads-up display that I believe you've heard us talk about. It's a tremendous assist to the pilots in landing the ship. So all we can do is wait and see what it looks like tomorrow and call it the best way we can.
The second half, has anyone seen the crew? Does anyone know what the crew's saying, doing, thinking today?
They're a very relaxed crew. They were all out running this morning. They're in really good shape.
Statement on the President's potential visit here.
Reggie Turnell, BBC.
I have questions for Glenn Lunny and General Abrahamson. Could Glenn Lunny tell us, please, if he will consider extending the mission if there is trouble getting SPAS-01 back?
Okay. First off, I don't think we would be dealing much with a mission extension. We have running the simulations, grapples and recaptures of the SPAS satellite. It seems to me we've done over 200 of them in the simulator. Over 300? We've done an awful lot of them. And I would also comment that the skill of this particular crew is outstanding in that regard. Both of the people on board, John Fabian and Thagard, who will be operating the Canadian manipulator arm, have had a lot of experience in the development of the arm, and they are really very, very good at it. So we believe that that in itself will go straight forward. There are always a possibility that funny circumstances could arise where we might have difficulty. We also believe that we would just have to work out in real time whatever those difficulties were and try to get the SPAS. We have looked at plans for moving away from it and re-rendezvous back with it, and that gets fairly difficult not only from a timeline point of view, but it's difficult to track. The route we have on board tracks to 3,000 feet, and that's all. It would be a question of rendezvous fuel, etc. So our basic approach is to count on the equipment and the people that we have on board, and both of those quantities we have a high degree of confidence, and we believe that we will recapture it at time we have planned or soon thereafter, and we don't expect to run into anything that would ever result in a mission extension past that for the reasons I described, Reggie.
And a couple of quick ones for General Abrahamson. Now that Ariane has flown successfully, are you going to be short of payloads on the shuttle next year?
I offer my congratulations to Fred today, by the way.
Thank you.
I have always said, and I think this is the important thing, that the Ariane team, we expect that they are going to be a successful, and they clearly are a professional team, and we can't be planning competition with Ariane on the basis of a problem here or there, just like I know they are not planning their competition with us on the basis of a problem. I think the real issue is we've got to assume that they're going to be the successful team that I know they can be, just as they assume that for us. Now, we look ahead, frankly, we're very encouraged in terms of that competition. I've indicated, and I know you've heard me, that even during the time when we had the engines that were down and we were having our own troubles, that we signed up 14 more reservations for communication satellites during that period. And so we're not at all concerned that the competition is one that we can't win. But I want to win it on the success of Ariane, certainly not on problems.
And an unrelated question about astronauts. It's noticeable that Sally Ride's husband is flying with another girl in 3 missions' time. Have you got some sort of rule of thumb? You've got 3 teams of married astronauts that you will not send them together?
I don't know of any rule of thumb, Reg, either way.
Okay, Lynn Shearer from ABC.
Would you like to suggest, Reg?
I have 2 for Abe. First, Abe, have you...
Where are you, Lynn? Oh, hi, Lynn.
Have you ever, in any simulations or anything, aborted a flight because of bad weather in Dakar, and how comfortable would you feel doing that?
In simulations, frankly, I just don't know the answer to that. We have run simulations where we use aborts, and we use aborts for a series of different reasons, of course. And you wouldn't change the procedure at all. So I can't give you a specific answer that a simulation might be different because of that particular abort. You do recognize that we do have a range of options as we go up, and there is an overlap in our return to launch site abort and the length of time that we use for Dakar itself. But there is a significant portion of the mission that we rely on Dakar. And I think we just have to be satisfied that we could make a safe and a successful abort.
And the other question is, this very smooth countdown, do you attribute that at this point more to what the team is doing or more to Challenger's performance?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. Certainly, the Challenger came down from the last mission in better shape than we'd ever had. By the time we counted out problem areas, there were a few more than indicated at the end of mission briefing, of course, than we came up with. Do you remember exactly how many it was?
Almost 40-something.
It turned out to be 40 some, finally. They were all quite minor and quite easy. So that indicates the Challenger itself was in good condition. But in addition to that, the people have continued to perform in just an outstanding way. And if you don't mind, I'd like to hitchhike on your question just a little bit. We have a program here at SC and in fact throughout NASA where we try to recognize and award people who've really done an outstanding job. We saved about a day in this particular flow because one of our team, a GS-13 here down at the Cape, was looking at some of the modifications that we were making to our launch tower to avoid some of the rain problems we had last time, if you recall. And just saw in his judgment that our plan was not as good as it should be, and just took a bit of teeth and went out and searched on this. His name is Marshall Strong, and he did a great job in finding a problem that later on, had we found it in the count, it would have cost us an additional day. So we were delighted to award that gentleman an incentive award and to recognize that. So and he is just one example amongst many. And I've tried to indicate in the past that the operation status of the shuttle is a function of the team and how well the team can solve problems. So I think the answer is both, and I'm really proud of both, frankly.
Bill Hines from Chicago Sun-Times.
Yeah, think back to the possibility of an abort into Dakar. Assuming a 7:33 liftoff Eastern time and say 20 or 20 minutes to get across there, what would be the clock time approximately in Dakar? I'm trying to figure out how many hours separate us.
I don't know for sure, Bill. It's about noon, I think. Noon or 1 o'clock local time there.
1 o'clock.
I think.
First row over here.
And Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, Frankfurt, West Germany. I have a question. This will be the first time that the shuttle will land here at the Cape, but in the program, in the long run, the shuttle would land every time, all the time at the Cape once the landing capacity here is established. But now I see that probably you still plan to land at Edwards, without emergency, I mean. So in the long run, will the Cape be the only landing spot, or will you have regular landings in Edwards as well? And if so, why?
Well, I considered taking it to Paris and landing it at the air show at Le Bourget. The Cape will always be the primary landing site if the shuttle itself is to be used out of the Cape. Later on, when Vandenberg Air Force Base is ready and stands as a Western launch site available to both commercial and security programs, then obviously an efficient operation would be if that shuttle is going to be used next to land at Vandenberg. So it'll be both of those. The reason that we are not going to the Cape in some of our launches in the future here are very specific reasons. For example, on the 8th flight, it'll be a night launch and a night landing. And we'd like to do that the first time on the desert, where we've got a lot of room, just for conservative reasons. Later on, there'll be a few other reasons. We still haven't got the HUD on the Columbia, so for a little while we'll be landing there using the Columbia as well. But that doesn't take away from our primary intent, and that's to make most of our landings here at the Cape.
We're going to take about 3 more questions and then go to other centers and come back. Frank Yacenda from Today.
Yes, I have a question for each of the 3 NASA gentlemen. First for Glenn. We were told this morning that 2 astronauts will be wearing biomedical harnesses, but Sally Ride wouldn't be one of them. Could you detail a little bit why that is?
I don't know his particular reason. I believe the people wearing them will be Norm Thagard and John Fabian. I don't know how we selected that. Norm certainly is easy to pick because he'll be downstairs. How they decided between John, I don't exactly know, but it's just, I suppose, my convenience.
Colonel Abramson, in terms of turnaround time, are there any other factors besides landing here that you expect will cut time down, considering the Challenger was in shape last time, too?
Do you mean in the next flow? I think within the next flow it'll primarily be efficiency in our operations, and of course that was an important factor here. But we do have some major management efforts going on now, which will look to see, can we simplify, in fact, that ground checkout procedure. That's going on just all the time. And we look to those simplified procedures, and in fact, sometimes times when we won't have to check some of the things that we're checking right now because they work in the air, in the way you do with an airplane. But that'll happen over a long period of time. That's not the way we intend to on the next mission.
Thank you. The last question, just briefly for Al O'Hara. A few weeks ago, the press, you mentioned a black box kind of problem. How was that resolved, that problem?
Several weeks ago?
Yeah, a few weeks ago, there was a briefing, and there was, just before the move out of the VAB, there was a problem discovered.
Can somebody help me? What black box it was?
Is that the inertial measurement unit we changed?
No, that was the pad.
Okay, we'll check that in the past data reports. We're going to go to the other centers now and then come back here for questions. And we will go to the Johnson Space Center in Houston first.
Yes. Abe, I have one. Is STS-10 now formally going to be dropped as a designation, or is it going to take place after 9, or what? You weren't very clear on that, sir.
Jules, I have the new issue of the flight manifest in front of me, and the way we're showing STS-10 is as a flight of opportunity at this point in time. The mission itself is officially delayed.
So it could happen after STS-9.
If a payload developed that we could move in quickly, and of course that's the whole philosophy of the flight of opportunity approach, then conceivably it would fly. I personally think that's a very low probability event.
This lady here, please give your name and affiliation.
Corey Yarbrough with the Morning Advocate and State Times in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. General Abramson, do you envision any time in the next, say, 5, 10, 15 years, someone who is not of a scientific background going on a space shuttle? Say, one of us.
Are you volunteering? Well, as you may know, the administrator has had a committee looking into the criteria that we would use to fly citizens or other people who can share the experience and then communicate the experience. That committee is nearing the time for their final report. There have been some discussions, and I certainly now is not the time to give the results of that committee. But the toughest part is deciding who gets to go. We believe that it's certainly going to be much less than 10 or 15 years from now that we will have non-professional astronauts flying in the program. Let me give what I think is a good indication of just how strong we feel about it. We have this last summer expanded our payload specialist policy, as you may know. We did that with the intent of allowing people who are specialists in experimental payloads or in a communications flight or whatever it is that we're going to go on to come and participate in the flight program so that they could add to the flight. Now that doesn't fall in your category that you discussed, but as we've gone through and developed the kind of minimum training program that those people would require to become contributing and safe members of the shuttle crew itself, we think that we can do that in 6 months or less and not only a few hundred hours of training. So we're very encouraged, and I think whoever finally does get to go, either he or she is not going to have to wait 10 or 15 years.
Gentleman back here.
Dan Hill from the Lufkin Daily News in Lufkin, Texas. I'm interested in the new lighter weight protective heat tiles. Just how confident are you in the new tiles, and what will be the benefit of those?
Let me see. Are you talking about the thing that we call advanced frizzy?
Right, the new lighter weight tiles.
We have a material on the Challenger pod that is called advanced frizzy. It's kind of a blanket material. If you looked at it, it would be a very rough-looking blanket, perhaps like a fiberglass material. That has already flown. As a matter of fact, we had on the front end of the pod, if you recall, in the last flight, some erosion of that material after the heat pulse. It was not a heat concern, but something that's been afterwards that we don't fully understand yet. What we have done in place of that is to put some white tiles back on the pod, back in the sense that it's the same configuration as we flew on the previous previous Columbia flight. So we have the configuration on the pod that we flew in Columbia. On the front side of the pod, the advanced is still on most of the pod after that, other than that erosion, which we have yet to figure out, we expect the advanced frizzy to be a big help in the future. Mostly not so much in terms of weight, but in terms of the fact that it's more durable, it doesn't break as much, and we won't have as much tile chipping and repairing, and then it'll just work here at the Cape as we have had with the tiles in general and the white pot tile, especially the thin ones on the top side of the ship.
Jules, this is for Glenn, I guess. And it's a landing question. If the weather at the Cape were really bad on landing day next Friday, and it weren't much better at Edwards, but were acceptable, how much longer could the Challenger fly? In other words, how much longer are consumable supplies good for?
Jules, I don't have an exact readout past 2 days. I know we have 2 days of contingency built into the plan. Depending on how much lead time we had in terms of knowing that, we could choose to power down and stretch a little bit if we were faced with like a prolonged period of bad weather at each place. I don't know for sure that we can go past 2 days contingency, but I believe that we can.
Let's say they were bad in a prolonged fashion at both Edwards and at the Cape. Would you land at White Sands?
Well, sooner or later we're going to have to land the orbiter, and our priorities will be Kennedy, Edwards, and White Sands next. And all backed into a corner, that's the order in which we will select to do things.
And that's all the questions from JSC.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville.
Good afternoon, Tom Knight, WAFF-TV. I believe the question would be for Glenn. Norm Thagard and John Fabian will be wearing the biomed harnesses during launch. Will they also redon the harnesses during the 10 psi, down to 10 psi reduction in the cabin pressure during the flight?
I don't for sure the answer to that question. It should be readable in the flight plan. I guess my intuition is I would rather doubt it.
All right, and could you elaborate possibly on the extent of Dr. Thagard's experiments? Will he be drawing any blood or anything to that?
No blood drawing. But there are a number of experiments on board which are sort of standard experiments for the investigation of the type that Norm will be conducting. We are looking at two sorts of things in terms of what is happening to people when they go into space. We're trying to examine the effects of fluid shifts in the body, and we're trying to examine this effect that I guess you could call sort of a conflict of the senses, in that the way you move around is not the way you expect to have to move around. That is, it takes a very light touch to move, and there's sometimes disorientation associated with that. Otherwise, the process is reversed when we come back. I cannot go through all the particular experiments that the mechanics of the experiments. However, about a dozen or 15 or so different kinds of experiments that will be conducted to try to measure things and get a quantitative feel for these two kinds of things that are happening to every person's body, any person's body who is exposed to this kind of environment. And they are sort of not timelined out in great detail, but the hardware is available and the time is available for Norm to conduct those as he sees fit during the course of the flight.
Thank you. That's all the questions from Marshall.
Okay, thank you. We're coming back here then to the Kennedy Space Center. We're starting in this up here.
Sharpless Crippen. For General Abramson, as the Space Shuttle program becomes more of a part of our everyday lives, from both the standpoint of scientific advances and educational ones, the positive reactions, people of all ages, especially younger people, seem to be growing. In light of that, will the Space Shuttle program still continue with such projects as the Student Involvement Project, things like that?
I think the answer is clearly yes. It's definitely yes, as long as it's got anything to do with it. I think that's one of our most exceptional programs, and one that just excites young people everywhere. If I remember the numbers right, we've had 3 selections now. We've had 3 years of the secondary school involvement program for the Space Shuttle, and of course that was preceded by the one on Skylab itself. And I think something over 7,000 letters of interest from young people and from science teachers all over the country. Unfortunately, we are still finding that there are some schools and school systems that are not very familiar with it yet. So we're trying to counteract that in every way we can and involve more people and more programs. The Getaway Specials offer an opportunity to extend that, and that's being extended in many countries through the Getaway Specials. There is an SSIP kind of contest going on in Australia right now based on using the Getaway Special. You know, about 30% of our Getaway Specials are purchased by people and then often donated to educational institutions, such as our ANTS project on this particular flight, Camden, New Jersey High School, which is just wonderful. I'm sure glad the ants will be out in the back, however, not inside. You know, I think that's a very vital part of the program. It's just not going to stop, Jack.
Okay. Carlos Byers from the Houston Chronicle.
I hate to pursue this biomed harness business any farther, but after the announcement this morning, some of us were told later that the information of the morning briefing was incorrect, that in fact only Thagard was going to wear the biomed harness. Now we're back to two folk again. Surely this is not a decision to keep shifting back and forth during the day. I assume that the latest thing that you've just told us is correct. Is that right?
To my knowledge, it is. Bob Bazell, NBC.
Question for General Abramson. In the past, when we've discussed the success or the of it in various parts of the shuttle program, you always said, well, we never lost a customer. Since then, you've lost your biggest customer, the Defense Department, at least for one aspect of it. And you've had to switch around a lot of payloads because of your IUS difficulties. Is this going to delay the time when the shuttle starts to break even in terms of its operational cost? Are we still in a developmental phase that you didn't anticipate?
No. I'd like to correct the terminology you used, Bob, if you don't mind. We didn't lose a customer. We just have a payload that's delayed. That customer is going to fly at some point in time. And that's about all I can say about it. I don't think it's going to delay it at all. I think the important thing is that an operation program has just got to be able to have the flexibility to absorb some of the kinds of shifts, and they are going to happen. And while we don't like it, because it costs more effort on everybody's part to replan and redo things, that has no real long-term impact on the program, Bob. Not at all.
Al Slagle from Daily News.
Al Slagle, New York Daily News. You've already answered the question I had earlier about who's going to be riding down in the middeck. Where will the other two mission specialists be? Which seats?
I think Sally's in the middle, kind of, and John is on the right-hand side.
Dave Dooling, here in the front row. Bob.
For Abe, you've done a bit of brag on how you've managed to show the turnaround time and your hopes for the future, but the National Research Council recently reported that if you're going to reach the 40 per year flight rate you're hoping for, you need essentially one more of just everything, possibly even 6 or 7 orbiters, and they held out the potential for long downtimes, both in terms of orbiters, spares, etc. Have you had a chance? Has your office had a chance to analyze that report? Do you agree with it? And what are you doing to meet the shortfalls as you perceive them?
I think the report is quite consistent with what we've said, both in our testimony and in our budget statements in particular. The report was, of course, referring to getting to the problem of getting up to an arbitrary rate of 40. Our plans right now are to get to 24 per year by 1988, and we hope, obviously, that the market and the demand will warrant going above that. The important things are there are some facilities that have to be filled in. We are pursuing the facility questions and trying to fill those in. Probably the most important particular investment is spares, and knows just how hard we've been working in terms of expanding our investment in spares, and we're doing that by cutting manpower in various parts of the program. which is all part of the overall plan of making the shuttle more effective and more efficient. So I believe that report is basically consistent with what we have said. And what we have said is that in order to get to those high flight rates of 40 per year or so, we need at least an additional orbiter, and in addition to that, an investment in facilities and spares. So we have no objection to what it says in the report.
Morton Dean from CBS.
General, tomorrow we'll make a little bit of U.S. space history. Until now, the U.S. space program has been all white and all male. Do you think it should have changed sooner and could change sooner? What are your deep personal feelings about that?
Well, first of all, I think there are two important milestones as far as the ladies are concerned and that side of it. The first one is tomorrow. And that's one that should be noted and is being noted by all of you. That's a milestone, our first U.S. lady astronaut in space. I think that could have taken place sooner, just like I think we could have had ladies doing things across our entire society earlier than they have been. There's a second milestone, and that's not quite so dramatic, and it's going to be a lot harder to tell, but it's even more important than tomorrow's. And that milestone that says when we have ladies going into space and doing other things on the program and nobody notices. It's just taken for granted, and it's part of our entire society. And our society has, we can't afford to waste the talent and the capability of half of the people in our society. So I think we could have done it earlier, not only in space, but in all aspects of our society. And I'm just delighted that we're correcting it as fast as we can.
Mark?
Just to follow, I assume you also mean that's true of black astronauts?
Of course. By the way, the first black astronaut who was selected, his name was Dr. Robert Lawrence. He was selected on the main orbiting laboratory program with me long ago. Tragically, he was killed 6 months after his selection. But there was one that was selected a long time ago, and of course that program, not only was he killed, but that program never went ahead. So I think many of us, including his wife and those of us who felt very strongly about what Bob could contribute, are going to be looking forward to Guy Bluford's contribution in the next flight.
Just a quick follow-up. Sally Ride said during an interview that she still felt there was an attitude, NASA, not a major problem, but an attitude, show-me attitude. Do you sense that that's true, that there are many people, or still a few people around who don't believe women's place is up in the shuttle?
I hope not. I think that NASA has a show-me attitude for everyone in every job and every position. And I hope that's the healthy one, not one that singles out the business of show me because you're a minority member or a woman. I know it applies to my job.
Jerry Hannafin from Time.
For Major Green, given the wind that we're observing, where is it relative to the, is it right down I guess it's runway 15? And if it's not right down the runway, is it across? And would this wind be within acceptable limits, sir?
The winds that we're looking at now are getting a little stronger than what we're anticipating tomorrow morning. Our forecast for the morning is about a crosswind, but it's going to be about 5 knots, which is within limits. As we get later on in the afternoon, we get the sea breeze, and we start getting the strong surface winds we have now. This is probably around 10, maybe 12 knots. But the forecast for tomorrow will be light enough so it won't cause a problem.
This gentleman here.
In a live report, I've been asked by a German radio station yesterday, NASA is not training lady astronauts for astronaut pilot or for commander of spaceships, but just scientific astronauts. I told them I would ask you and tell them what you are going to tell me.
NASA has just announced that we are opening up a new astronaut selection, and that will be the start of what we hope will be an astronaut selection that will take place every year. It'll be a varying number. We expect to select somewhere between 10 or 12, and about half of those will probably be pilots, and about half of them will be mission specialists. And there is absolutely no requirement to be male for the pilots by any means.
Craig Cavalt from Aviation Week.
Another couple of Dakar questions. If your weather at Dakar is consistently bad through the night or bad some hours prior to scheduled liftoff here, how far will you take the count? Do you have a cutoff time? Secondly, well, not a cutoff time, but a time you would cut off before proceeding too far. Secondly, who at astronaut office will be up in the C9 tomorrow at Dakar?
How far will we take it out? Probably down.
Our plan is to, if we load cryos, we will continue down at T-9 and hold, and we can recycle the 24 hours at that time.
Okay, we're going to have one question now, one more question from Lynn Shear of NBC. ABC, excuse me, Lynn.
You know something I don't know? Abe, I wonder, follow up on your attitude about women astronauts, if your attitude means that we can expect to see more women assigned to future flights fairly soon.
No, sorry, I'll go to them right away.
Surely.
I thought that...
Absolutely, the ladies are going to be assigned as we go ahead. But I think it's important, however, to remember kind of the way in which the astronauts have been assigned in the past. It's basically been one of kind of seniority and training, a combination of training and seniority. As you can notice, we're well into the class of 78. We lost some of the ladies because they were pregnant in terms of the program. But yes, you'll see more, and you'll see them quickly.
We have another question from Johnson Space Center, then we'll come back for two more here.
Jules Bergman, ABC. Abe, first of all, I've been asked by several women here, can you refer to women instead of ladies? And secondly, my question was, did you really mean to imply that women, non-test pilots, would be current to be selected in the new selection?
In the selection criteria, I didn't get the first part of that, Jules. You'll have to ask that again. In the criteria for the pilots, what we have requested is test pilot experience. Now, we do expect that the competition will be so keen, as it always is, that will be an important criteria. And obviously, if there are many test pilots, and there are a few, then they'll be considered on an equal basis to men. But I think that there is the same problem that our society has in general. There just aren't many lady test pilots, so I think there is just an experience base that tend to go against that. But that isn't because they're ladies. It's just because we hope to have test pilots as that's an important factor. We have a terribly tough competition. It makes it tough for you and I, Jules.
I missed that.
Okay, coming back to here, we'll have two questions before we wind up. Jerry Lippman.
Jerry Lippman from Newsday. Sally Ride has been quoted as saying she doesn't think she's historical material, doesn't think she's another Amelia Earhart. To the knowledge of any of you gentlemen, has she said anything out of public hearing that would of the historic meaning of her role on this flight?
I didn't hear all those questions. I'm not sure I heard all your questions. And I hesitate to speak for anybody else. I think Sally fully understands the significance of her participation in this as first woman astronaut.
Mark Kramer from CBS.
Of the class of 78, I believe all the mission specialists but 5 have been assigned. 4 of those 5 are women. Is that something more than a coincidence? Can you comment on that?
I can't put any particular significance, Mark. The only one that I can say is that, if you recall, that two of the ladies were pregnant as we've been going through that, so that cuts down that number a little bit. I don't believe it has any significance.
Final question. There's someone missing today, and I think that's the flight surgeon. Is there a reason why there's no flight surgeon here today?
We're going to
You said he invites him and he never showed up.
We've had very few questions in the past. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to pass them along. And thank you all for coming. We'll see you tomorrow morning at a launch.